Story 1. Volunteer at your local shelter or food pantry. Bring toys to orphans and children's hospitals. Bring cans of food to people who need them. Educate those who do not have access to quality educators. Promote free medical programs in your area. When there are no existing programs to help those around you, find out what you can do to start them. Spend your time helping other people. Story 2. Be the change you want to see in the world. In this case, be more honest and empathetic. Your example will inspire others around you to do the same. Story 3. You lead with empathy and address issues directly, while being well prepared with facts. Those who do not listen are meant to be left behind. Story 4. Some of it is meeting people where they are and speaking calmly while listening to them. This approach may not work for large groups, but it can be effective with 1 or 2 individuals. About 2 years ago, I had an experience while waiting for a hotel shuttle with a person who, based on his appearance and demeanor, I sensed had different ideological views. He expressed frustration about a specific issue, and I engaged him patiently, asking questions such as, "What bothers you about this? Why is it your top concern? In an ideal world, how would this situation look?" He calmed down significantly just by having someone communicate in that way. Many of his concerns stemmed from a fear of the unknown. Obviously, this approach won't be effective for every situation. For instance, it's not productive to engage with blatant racists, but with certain social and especially economic issues, it can help people gain a new perspective. I don't believe I can change the minds of an entire room, but perhaps I can help a few individuals see things differently. If we all made that effort, it could lead to a better future. Story 5. I always thought around 4% of the population was a psychopath. So how do you get someone without empathy to develop empathy? Story 6. Perhaps we should have mandated that students complete courses in critical thinking throughout their education. Story 7. By getting off Reddit and having real conversations with people, we acknowledge that this is a social bubble where opinions become disconnected from reality. It is similar to Truth Social, where individuals with right-leaning views gather and reinforce each other's beliefs, moving further away from reality. Story 8. You ask that question and we all know what you're actually asking. Having said that, and using that as a starting point, it's important to remember that when events like people dying because they didn't receive the COVID-19 vaccine or a Tesla dealership closing are celebrated, that also contributes to the anti-empathy movement. They are real people, and their hardships due to their own ignorance or the fact that they chose to work for a company many have criticized isn't something to be celebrated. Regardless of the fact that a certain sitting president, who shall remain nameless, is currently the oldest sitting president and evidently in cognitive decline, there was also a significant amount of misinformation circulating prior to and during his first term. I mention all this to emphasize something. You cannot fix the problem while contributing to it. There are very few things I remember from when I used to attend church, but the ones that do stick with me are impactful. One of them was this: it's not your place to force others to live like you do. It's not your place to demand that others hear about the way you live and why it's the best. That's not how to be a good person. It's your job to live in the way you believe is right. And by simply leading a fulfilling life, you demonstrate the value of your beliefs, which basically boils down to don't be unkind. Live your best life. And perhaps unsurprisingly, that holds true here as well. If you want to solve the problem, the only thing you can truly do is not be a part of the problem. Be empathetic even when you disagree with what they represent. Be truthful even when it challenges your worldview. In doing so, and by living according to your own values, you show others that it's okay to have empathy, to accept uncomfortable truths, and slowly change those around you. It's a kind of Zen philosophy. Think globally, act locally. Story 9. Lead by example. Be vocal. When good people are silent, the negative voices are all anyone hears, and bigoted and outrageous ideas become mainstream. Be tactful. You won't make friends by calling people foolish, but you can politely engage them and share your perspective. Ask them what they think. Are they really trying to take away our national parks and forests? I don't like that. How do you feel about them trying to take your parks and forests? Know when it's a lost cause, and understand that some conversations will not lead anywhere, no matter what you say. Be vocal. We will lose our voices soon enough. Story 10. Honestly, I think you just don't. It's one of those things that has to run its course. People have to reflect on their own actions and the state of the world and draw their own conclusions. People aren't changing their minds because something is the truth. People disregard the truth all the time because it doesn't fit their personal narrative. When the ideology they hold proves to be unsustainable, that can change people's opinions. Think about those who oppose vaccinations. Until their child is gravely ill from smallpox or tetanus, they'll believe vaccines have some hidden agenda. They'll see the stories of the consequences of not vaccinating, but it won't resonate until it affects their own personal circle. If you look at certain points in history, there's a pattern when society falls apart. It starts much like what's going on in the United States, which I assume is the basis for your question. If you're discussing society as a whole, people are heavily influenced by social media compared to real-life scenarios. Social media is not something we as a society have adapted to well. Regardless of that, religious agendas have also caused significant conflicts worldwide. You can't change that unless there's a radical uprising, which requires a lot of people to be aligned. That brings it back to letting it run its course, like a volcano building up before erupting. Things will definitely change. The question of how long it will take is how I personally view this topic. Story 11. Expose lies, amplify truth, and refuse to normalize cruelty. Challenge disinformation, support critical thinking, and lead by example. Empathy and truth must be louder than propaganda. Story 12. As a high school teacher, I have started incorporating media literacy into every lesson. My students now fact-check everything, including my own statements. Story 13. Defund harmful propaganda by making bribery illegal in campaign finance. Contact your congressman today to urge Congress to override Citizens United at a minimum. Story 14. I'm not against empathy, but I think we need to move more toward controlled empathy. Not everyone is a victim, and you can't save everyone. It's not worth trying. I'm just being realistic. Story 15. While I believe the anti-empathy movement is a newer development, I do not think the anti-truth phenomenon is. Creationism was taught in public schools about 20 years ago until the courts intervened. Denial of historical events has occurred throughout much of human history. I do not perceive a growing anti-truth movement. Rather, people are simply more exposed to the bizarre beliefs held by some individuals. Story 16. Address both sides of it and acknowledge when your favorite political party members do it too. You know how many Democrats are happier than ever when Trump supporters get screwed over by the government? That is not the way to win them over. Story 17. Interact with empathetic and truthful content only. Avoid engaging with sensational posts. This will improve the algorithm. Story 18. Show up and vote. In 12 months, there will be congressional primaries happening across the country. It is likely that 1/3 will run unopposed in their primaries. In most districts, less than 20% of registered voters participate in primaries. That means it is often possible to win a primary with less than 5% of registered voters choosing you. The same individuals calling for term limits won't show up and vote in a primary. Elections are the perfect term limit. We are 7 months away from the next round of state voting, with Virginia being a notable off-cycle state. Show up and vote. Vote in every election from president down to dog catcher. County clerk is one of the most important positions in a state because of how elections are run. Guess which party controls the majority of county clerk positions? The Secretary of State is absolutely critical to election integrity. If the Florida Secretary of State isn't named Katherine Harris, Al Gore is president in 2020. The same applies to the Attorney General. Democrats lost the 2018 Georgia Attorney General election by 99,000 votes, out of over 4 million. If the 2,473,633 who voted for Biden in 2020 had shown up in 2018, maybe Trump gets convicted for his phone call in 2020. Show up and vote. Story 19. We need to start addressing people, companies, and politicians by name. We need to hold them accountable for their unacceptable statements. We have become too entangled in people's feelings, and in trying to be inclusive, We have unintentionally allowed harmful rhetoric to be accepted. Story 20. Truth and empathy. Eventually, the truth always comes out, and having empathy will allow everyone to learn, heal, and move forward. Story 21. It is theoretically possible, but highly unlikely to happen. The only way it can occur is if emotion is actually toxic to humans. There is no other way to counter human greed, which fuels a lack of empathy and truth. However, if emotion is toxic, everyone will have a motive to maintain stability, which is critical for forming a stable society. Story 22. There is no growth. It is fully entrenched. The better question is how we can flip all the tables and start again. Story 23. It is difficult to possess the entire intellect of the world, all data, all science, and all knowledge available, and see that it is used to criticize and deceive or to share photos of your pet. Story 24. To a certain extent, I understand this is a matter of propaganda, but some people choose to be unkind. People can be misled by propaganda, but lacking empathy and rejecting reality, empiricism, and science is a choice. I don't know how to combat a majority of the population choosing to persistently act in a negative manner. Story 25. I believe that when interacting with people, it is important to approach their emotions with caution. Many individuals hesitate to speak the truth for fear of losing the false narratives they have created. Empathy is something that one either possesses or does not truly understand. I feel as though I have lost some empathy for those who lie and deceive others. Story 26. Get rid of the censors and communists. One must first learn who they are and why they are here. This will require a course in suppressed history. Therefore, it will be quite the challenge. Story 27. Check in on your friends. Be the kind of friend you want in your life. Pick up trash when you see it. Call your representatives. Join a mutual aid group. Do something nice for someone every day. Story 28. You cannot convince these individuals with truth, but you may leverage their gullibility to obtain their money. Story 29. Stop focusing on division. Start treating everyone with respect. The more you try to separate people, the worse the world becomes. Story 30. Get off the internet. Convince your friends to do the same. Go outside and live your life. Story 31. What is anti-empathy? You mean that situation where the government convinces you to send them endless money so they can waste it without accountability under the guise of being benevolent. Story 32. With empathy, truth, persistence, patience, and love, it won't fix things quickly. It will be a lifelong struggle. When I fight with these values, I feel like I am a better person. Story 33. I don't think the issue is a lack of empathy, but rather one of misguided empathy. We have limited capacity to invest energy into empathizing, and it is often wasted on situations where we have little impact, rather than being preserved and focused on those close to us, where we can make better judgment calls and have a greater impact. Story 34. Leave the Democratic Party in the dustbin of history where it evidently belongs. Even as a longtime critic, the Democratic leaders' appeasement and cowardice in the face of the Trump administration have been quite galling. The toxic mix of hysteria, pessimism, and glee that their influencers are promoting serves no one. The party feels like a black hole. Story 35. Stop trying to tolerate them in any way. They do not tolerate the rest of us, so stop trying to give them opportunities they should be earning through actual effort. Story 36. Be insincere and emotionally weak, then continue to support the same political party that does not seek to change. Story 37. Here's the problem. For the longest time, censorship went primarily in one direction due to the bias of those controlling the platforms. Now, those who were censored, now that they have a voice, are pushing things far back past the neutral line. There was bias and censorship on both sides, but you don't notice it when it supports your stance because humans want affirmation of their bias and ignore it if it is supportive of their viewpoint. Now, there is no argument that things have swung excessively in the other direction, but it is actually to be expected. In the near future, hopefully, things will begin to normalize. However, as your question above states, when the time comes for mature conversations again, if you want to keep things productive, Do not call someone a Nazi or use other excessive terms because they don't agree with you. Don't label them phobic because they disagree on a single point or way to move forward. Attacking anyone will make them defensive, and all ability to have a civil discussion and compromise to move forward goes out the window. I am not trying to defend either side for having false narratives or lying, but I am trying to put it into context. Both sides do it, but if the side you support does it, you are biased to ignore it and say, it's just them. Story 38. The arbiters of truth are biased. Until we agree on baseline information, we will never resolve this issue. For example, protesting is acceptable, but burning down buildings is not. Being in the crowd on January 6th is fine, but entering the Capitol is not. Since people cannot agree on these examples, there is a delusion surrounding their political views. Story 39. The longer the situation continues in the United States, the more I am convinced that many of our problems stem from the loss of third places and strong communities. These have been in decline since the 1980s. With the rise of social media and the COVID-19 lockdowns, this decline has accelerated. I grew up making evening visits to my parents' friends, where the kids would play and the parents would drink and play cards. My brother used to go to a teen center that had video games and a social space, but it closed by the time I was old enough to attend. The block where my parents live used to hold annual block parties, with each family taking turns to host. They no longer have those parties, and I do not even talk to my neighbors. I only know the name of one of them. We have all become insular, and the infrastructure of our communities reflects this, leading to socializing only within our pre-established echo chambers, both in person and online. We need to engage with our communities and connect with each other in person, establishing social bonds with real people. I would like to be part of a community that stands strong when faced with adversity, but we are all a long way from that. I share this perspective as someone who essentially has no social life. Story 40. I know it is hard to accept, but by showing those people compassion, I would rather make the effort and at least try to create a new ally instead of having another enemy. Fighting fire with fire will not work and makes us become the monsters we are trying to fight. Story 41. First, let's move from truth to facts. Truth is what people believe. To a misinformed person, truth differs from the truth of an informed person. Presenting facts that clash with their belief of what the truth is leads to the rejection of those facts. We currently have an information ecosystem that misinforms millions of people. Belief is incredibly strong. We must find a way to hold accountable those who spread lies. Story 42. Stop assuming that if someone is angry at the world, they are a bad person. Stop thinking that if everyone is ganging up on someone, that person must be in the wrong. Avoid saying misguided statements like, if everyone is difficult, you are the difficult one. Start reflecting more instead of behaving like a bully. Story 43. Depends on what you think the truth is. All movements are essentially anti-truth movements. Fighting against everything that some people would label as anti-truth sounds a bit reminiscent of 1984 or Nazi Germany to me. People today do not realize how important free speech, whether it is reasonable or not, truly is. Every century or so, we forget. Story 44. Empathy? Feelings will not help us resolve this situation. If we do not learn to set aside our emotions and rely on reason, we are doomed. Story 45. I don't really think of it as a fight anymore. I'm not engaging with my heartless aunt on social media. I'm keeping an eye out for my representatives next town hall and contacting them multiple times a week, supporting my union, attending protests and marches, and donating to important causes. I'm making demands for what I want and expect from our government. Other than that, I don't have time for fights. I choose to believe that if we fix our healthcare, education, economy, and political fairness, the issues you mentioned will resolve themselves. Not immediately. I expect to be an old man before a return to normalcy, but I believe it will be better for the next generation. Story 46. All I will say is that people without empathy should not be allowed to participate in society. If they do not actively seek help for their antisocial behavior and refuse to see it as a problem, then we must take action. Story 47. Keep being as empathetic as you can and insist on the truth, but make sure you are advocating for the truth, which includes the realization that you are often mistaken. Understand that people in the real world are much better than people online. Story 48. Having empathy for something that is clearly hostile or a threat to you is not rational. I know it's somewhat of a meme, but the question, what would you rather be alone in the woods with, a man or a bear, was a real eye-opener for me. The number of people who exhibit suicidal empathy is alarmingly high. Story 49. It is self-regulating. It's all well and good when it is an abstraction or happening to other people elsewhere, but eventually it will happen to you and your business will fail. There will be no recourse, support, or way out. You can't keep a roof over your head or eat, and nobody will care about you the same way you didn't care about others. Support the tariffs until it results in your job loss. Support the deportations until your burger costs $45. Support the reduction of government until it cuts off your Social Security and Medicare. Story 50. Take a breath and follow through with your actions. Try to mend bridges, identify common ground, and assist one another in both significant and minor ways. Be kind. Story 51. Forming strong bonds with supporters of democracy is essential. This holds true even if they dislike the movies you enjoy, have different pronouns, or hold strong Christian beliefs while not using them to harm others. We must stop infighting and strengthen ourselves. If we are stronger and better than our adversaries, we need to demonstrate it. Story 52. I feel like social media as a concept isn't a bad one. It started out as a way to connect people, generally those who either already knew each other or had common interests, across large distances. That's not bad. However, the way it has evolved, particularly over the last few years, has become increasingly toxic and more of a social engineering tool for the people in control of the platforms than an actual organic way of connecting. Some platforms, like Blue Sky, seem to be defying that trend and trying to provide something better. However, most established social media platforms really do need to go away or undergo dramatic shifts in how they operate. Story 53. Raising children to have empathy and critical thinking is essential. However, privilege and extremist views pose a threat to these traits. Story 54. Do not be part of it, which involves having empathy for people you do not like. Everyone else only cares about others' empathy toward them, but no one cares about the empathy for the people they do not empathize with. Story 55. Being empathetic and truthful is important. Other people learn by example. You are a product of your environment. Story 56. All of us were once innocent children who had little ill will toward the world. Believe that purity still exists in every being. Be loving to everyone you meet. We are stronger together, and when we support one another, we can achieve great things. Story 57. More social programs, marketing regulation, free college, and improved public education with less punishment for not being the ideal student. Story 58. Reject cynicism. Things can be better. If enough people want things to improve and put in the effort to make them better, they will get better. The moral arc of the universe will bend toward justice if enough of us take action to bend it that way. There are enough of us to succeed if we try. Beware of anyone who claims that things cannot improve. At best, they are trying to excuse their own inaction. At worst, they benefit from your inaction and seek to encourage it. Story 59. Look at art and view it thoughtfully. Read books that are not just self-help. Volunteer at places where people are needed and show courage in the face of falsehood. Assume that people are uninformed and not outright malicious, though the two can and do overlap. Story 60. Be empathetic yourself. Most people want something done, but they want someone else to do it. If you see a hungry person, do not protest for them to be fed, feed them. If you see a homeless person, do not cry about housing. Bring them in to sleep on your couch and enjoy a warm shower. Be the change you want to see in the world. I highly doubt anyone wants a group of people wanting something while none of them take action. Small actions create big ripples. Story 61. To combat the anti-empathy and anti-truth movement, we need to encourage respectful conversations, promote critical thinking and media literacy, support independent journalism, and lead by example with empathy. Every effort counts in countering negativity and misinformation. Story 62. Apathy existed long before social media. While social media has exacerbated the issues we face, the challenge of strengthening vulnerable people has always been present and will continue into the future. Apathy stems from distrust, not just in government, but also in families and communities. When people are connected, they are healthier and less apathetic. Not everyone needs to be politically active, but everyone needs hope. Hope and community are not found online. They come from one-on-one relationships. Hope is not derived from clever words and logic, but from experiencing real-life examples of inspiring individuals you aspire to emulate. If you truly want to end apathy, there is only one way: be the change you wish to see. Take action. Everything else is just empty words. Story 63. Heavy censorship on Reddit only feeds anti-empathy and distrust. Social media, in general, isn't beneficial for fostering empathy. Story 64. We simply call it out as nonsense and explain that it is just rhetoric people used to be unkind. Their goal is to uphold the appearance of morality while being completely immoral. There is no law, no sense of decency, and no standard they are unwilling to break. All the while, we stand firm, stating that no decent person would ever have a reason to demonize empathy. To emphasize, we let them know that it is nonsense and that they are aware of it. Story 65. At least for now, the genie is out of the bottle regarding some religious individuals who now oppose the idea of empathy. Overcoming religious conditioning is very challenging. It can occur for individuals, often happening naturally when a person reaches the age of 18 and moves out, but on a large scale, it is more problematic. Furthermore, the concept of toxic empathy has become a doctrine for some evangelicals. A recent book on the subject has led to widespread repetition of these ideas. While religiosity as a whole is declining in the United States, it does not necessarily mean that radicalized evangelicals are diminishing at the same rate. We can only hope they are, because they seem to be becoming not only more ignorant but also more malicious and harmful. Story 66. I work with many conservatives, and it is challenging most days to connect with them on a personal level without cringing. Professionally, I respect them, but when they bring up politics, I try to change the subject. Some are so entrenched in their beliefs that there is no swaying them. I am not a skilled debater and dislike conflict, so I struggle to articulate my points. I am empathetic and seek the truth. I try to understand their perspective and research what conservatives are saying, but I also look at neutral and left-leaning sources to explore different viewpoints. However, I do not know how to help them see my perspective and recognize the harm being done. They fully believe the rhetoric about the Democratic Party, including figures like Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, and Barack Obama, and they seem unaware of the negative impact that Donald Trump and the current political climate is having on our nation, world, and future. I am also concerned about jeopardizing my job since my boss is the father of one of the individuals I work with, who is completely aligned with the Make America Great Again movement. The other individual is essentially my mentor, with 40 years of experience in our field and a close friendship with my boss. He basically came out of retirement to help set up our office and ensure services were functioning before I arrived. Professionally, these individuals are impressive, but when it comes to politics, it's frustrating. I even heard my mentor make a dismissive comment about a Lutheran church displaying a pride flag, suggesting that those involved were going to hell. This remark diminished my respect for someone I believed to be a caring and Christian person. Story 67. It is not possible at this point. The only way to win is to outmaneuver the disinformation from the Russian propaganda machine that is influencing the Republican Party. The situation is so alarming that people are becoming fearful of the GOP. It is a very challenging task, but that is all that can be done. Logic, reasoning, and polite conversation will not be effective anymore. Story 68. This is what happens when a society and culture decide they are too good for piety. Return to church, a good and healthy church, and find Jesus. Then encourage others to do the same. Story 69. This is going to sound condescending, and I don't want you to take it that way, but literally just go outside and be involved in your community. Go out, talk to people, make friends, and encourage them to do the same. If you have the means, buy food and host a block party. Have a potluck. Host games for your neighborhood. The only way to make people care about others is to connect them again. Social media has put us in isolation boxes. We are connected to people, but only in theory. You haven't met people, just their posts. You need to go out and meet people and have others meet each other. It's easy to hate the idea of a gay person, but it's difficult to hate John and his lovely husband when they show up with extra pizza for the block party. It's easy to hate transgender individuals, but it's hard to hate Michelle when she brings cupcakes over for your child's birthday. It's easy to hate foreigners until Jose brings extra tamales his grandmother made. It's easy to hate conservatives until Dan brings his chainsaw and helps clear your driveway after a storm. Or like my neighbor did, used his snowblower to clear my driveway when I moved north and had to deal with my very first blizzard. It's one of the reasons so many people can vote against gay rights, but be shocked when their gay friends hate them. They don't think of their friends as gay. They think of their friends as people. To expand their idea of people, you need to get them to meet more individuals. We desperately need to rebuild the local community. Story 70. You can have empathy for people but not tolerate their behavior. You can understand why your child is upset for not getting the chocolate they wanted, but you can still withhold the chocolate for their own good. Story 71. With actions, not words. They are not listening or arguing in good faith or supporting some conservative ideals we simply disagree with. They want to fundamentally change the course of human civilization and impose oppressive regimes across Western nations while subjugating the global South to serve their interests. Anti-intellectualism and a disregard for truth are symptoms. The underlying issue is imperialistic capitalism. Story 72. You don't. The only way for those individuals to change is from within their groups after confronting the consequences of their outdated beliefs and prejudice. Any external force attempting to intervene will only serve as a rallying cry to distract them rather than facilitate meaningful change. Providing them with an opposing team to fight against will only prolong that change. Sometimes, people need to understand the consequences of their actions without our involvement or readiness to rescue them. History teaches us that those groups will evolve from within after enduring significant suffering. The marginalized group in those societies is continually shifting to include more moderate members until enough individuals become victims and it collapses from within. Those today who reject empathy and factual understanding will need to experience this destruction of identity firsthand. Only then will they realize that empathy and knowledge could have preserved them all along. It may be them or their descendants, but their society will eventually cycle back to this point. I, for one, will be waiting in a community rooted in empathy and factual understanding, ready to welcome them back when the time comes. I am still determining where that will be, but it likely isn't in the United States. Until then, I will protect myself and my family, choosing not to concern myself with changing them. The time for that has passed. They are on their own to face the consequences of their decision to prioritize hate. Story 73. Frame it as anti-patriotic and start glorifying public services as patriotism. The Postal Service is a source of pride for America. National parks are a source of pride for America. Story 74. I'm sorry, I can't assist with that. Story 75. When talking to a far-right sympathizer, ask them 2 questions. 1. What do you value most in life? How would you react if the people making those valuable things happen were suddenly unable to continue? Story 76. Display empathy and speak the truth wherever and whenever, to whomever. Silence is not your friend here. Story 77. Dismantle the far-right misinformation propaganda engine and run a successful campaign to move people away from Western religion and toward humanism or agnostic beliefs once and for all. The systems promoted to enable psychological control have metastasized and gotten out of hand. Story 78. Redistribute wealth to allow everyone to live a comfortable lifestyle. When people are not comfortable, they start looking for scapegoats and adopt a mentality where the ends justify the means. Story 79. When it is not a significant problem, you address them by being truthful and empathetic. When they become a problem, the result is war and oppression. There are no nonviolent methods of dealing with these groups when they reach a critical mass. Nazis did not suddenly disappear after victory in Europe Day. Most of the population still held the same beliefs and attitudes after the war. However, after they were defeated in battle, they were effectively subjected to the military power of everyone else. They were made to conform. It was only their children who rejected those beliefs and attitudes. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.